August in Houston doesn't just get hot. It gets personal. It crawls inside your clothes and sits there. It wraps around your throat like a hand that won't let go. The air doesn't move. The sky doesn't care. And every single surface, the steering wheel, the door handle, the belt buckle pressing against your gut, turns into a branding iron. 102 degrees. That's what the thermometer nailed to the porch post read when Dylan Garrett pulled his work van into the cracked driveway of 4418 Ridley Lane. A rental. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a window AC unit that had been wheezing since June like an old man climbing stairs. Dylan killed the engine and just sat there for a second. His arms were raw. Pink and itchy from fiberglass insulation that had been raining down on him for the last 6 hours inside an attic crawl space on the north side of Katy. Some dentist's office. The guy wanted a full duct replacement but only wanted to pay for a patch job. Dylan did the patch job. He always did what people asked, even when he knew it was the wrong call. That was his problem. Had been his whole life. He grabbed the Whataburger bag off the passenger seat, 2 honey butter chicken biscuits and a large sweet tea, and headed for the front door. His steel-toed boots were untied. His shirt had a brown ring of sweat around the collar that could have been mistaken for a tan line. And his knuckles, Lord, his knuckles were cracked and bleeding from catching them on a sheet metal seam inside that attic. He didn't even feel it anymore. His hands were so calloused, so scarred up from 5 years of HVAC work that pain had become just another texture. Like drywall dust, like copper shavings. Like the grit that lived permanently under his fingernails no matter how hard he scrubbed. He opened the front door, dark. Not lights off because we're saving electricity, dark. Not romantic evening, dark. This was angry dark, sitting in the silence waiting to explode, dark. The AC unit was dead. He knew it before he even stepped inside because the air hit him like walking into a dog's mouth. Wet, hot, thick, and stale. The little window unit in the living room, the one he'd resurrected twice already with electrical tape and a prayer, had finally given up. The fan wasn't spinning. The compressor wasn't humming. It was just a dead metal box shoved into a window frame, and the house was a swamp. Mia! No answer. He walked deeper inside. Set the Whataburger bag on the kitchen counter next to a pile of unopened mail and an ashtray that shouldn't have been there. Mia didn't smoke. That was the thing Dylan told himself every time he saw it. She doesn't smoke. That ashtray belongs to a friend. That lighter on the nightstand is for candles. He found her in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed with her legs crossed, fanning herself with a magazine. She was wearing a tank top and cut-off shorts, her dark hair pulled up in a messy bun, and the look on her face could have curdled milk. "Hey," Dylan said, "I brought food." She didn't look at him. "The AC's been out since noon, Dylan." "I see that. I'll take a look at it." "You'll take a look at it." She repeated it back to him the way people repeat things when they want you to hear how stupid you sound. "That's your answer for everything, isn't it? You'll take a look at it. You'll get to it. You'll figure it out next week." "Mia, I just walked in the door. And I've been sitting in this oven for 7 hours. She threw the magazine, not at him, at the wall. But the violence was the point. 7 hours, Dylan. No air. No car to go anywhere because you have the van. No money to call someone because we don't have any. He stood there in the doorway, his bleeding hands hanging at his sides, fiberglass still itching under his collar, and he took it. He absorbed it the way he absorbed everything, quietly, like a sponge dropped in dirty water. "I'll fix it," he said. "You know who doesn't have to fix it? Christian." There it was, Christian. The name had been showing up in conversation for about 3 weeks now, dropped in casually like seasoning. Christian said the funniest thing at work today. Christian rides a Harley, can you believe that? Christian told me I have a great smile. Always Christian. Always at the diner where Mia waited tables off Highway 6, slinging plates of chicken fried steak at the lunch counter. Christian gets things done, Dylan. He doesn't come home covered in dirt and say, "I'll take a look at it." He just handles it. Dylan swallowed hard. "Christian's a customer at your restaurant. He doesn't pay our rent. At least he pays attention to me." That one landed. Right in the sternum. Dylan felt his jaw tighten, but he didn't fire back. He never fired back. Confrontation made his stomach turn, made his hands shake even worse than the fiberglass itch, and he'd rather swallow glass than have a screaming match in a dark, boiling house at 9 o'clock at night. So he grabbed his flashlight from the junk drawer and walked over to the window unit. He crouched down, pulled the front panel off. The capacitor was blown. He could see the scorch mark even in the dim beam of the flashlight. Easy fix if he had the part. He didn't. He tried to jumper it. Tried to bypass the start relay using a screwdriver and a length of copper wire, the way Jose had taught him back when he was still an apprentice at the supply yard. His knuckles caught the edge of the housing and fresh blood ran down his index finger and dripped onto the carpet. He didn't flinch. Behind him, Mia stood in the kitchen, arms crossed, watching. And when he leaned closer to the unit, close enough to feel the dead stillness of its guts, he caught something. A smell, faint, sour, unmistakable, cigarette smoke, on her hair. Woven into the strands like someone had been leaning close to her, breathing near her, sitting on a bar stool or a motorcycle or a park bench and blowing smoke while they whispered things that made her laugh the way she used to laugh with him. Dylan's hands stopped moving. He knew. Somewhere in the part of his brain that he kept locked behind deadbolts and duct tape, he knew. But he put the panel back on the unit and stood up and said, "I need a part. I'll grab one from the supply yard tomorrow." Mia looked at him like he was furniture. "I'm going out. It's almost 10. So, where are you going?" "To get fresh air, Dylan, with friends, unless you want me to sit here and sweat to death waiting for you to fix something else that's broken." She grabbed her purse, the one with the frayed strap, the one she always complained about, and walked out the front door without kissing him, without touching him, without even looking back. The screen door slammed. Dylan stood in the middle of the living room. Sweat ran down the bridge of his nose and hung at the tip before dropping onto his boot. A fly buzzed somewhere near the kitchen. The Whataburger bag sat untouched on the counter, the grease already soaking through the paper. Then he heard it. A motorcycle, revving hard, 2 streets over, maybe 3. The growl of a Vitwin engine bouncing off the low rooftops of the neighborhood, and then the sound of it accelerating, fast, reckless, free, before fading south toward the freeway. Dylan closed his eyes. He told himself it was a stranger, just some guy on a bike. Some random dude heading to a late shift or a bar or wherever bikers go at 10 o'clock on a Tuesday in August. He told himself that because the truth was a door he wasn't ready to open. He turned off the flashlight, sat on the couch. The vinyl stuck to his back instantly, hot and slick. The ceiling fan overhead was off because the breaker kept tripping and he hadn't had time to fix that either. He sat there in the heat and the dark and the silence, and he listened to the nothing. No motorcycle. No Mia, no air conditioning, just the sound of a grown man trying very hard to breathe in a house that had stopped being a home a long time ago. Eventually, he leaned his head back and closed his eyes and forced himself toward something that might pass for sleep. His hands throbbed. The cut on his knuckle had dried into a dark crust. And somewhere on the south side of Houston, his wife was on the back of another man's motorcycle with her arms around his waist and her hair blowing in the hot wind, and a smile on her face that Dylan Garrett hadn't earned in years. He slept anyway, because that's what you do when you're too tired to fight and too scared to ask the questions that will burn your whole life down. You just close your eyes and pretend the fire isn't already lit. The van died on a Thursday, right in the middle of the intersection at Westthamer and Fondren, which, if you know Houston, you know that's about the worst possible place for anything to die. Lunchtime traffic, 12 lanes of irritated commuters. The thermometer on the bank across the street read 98 degrees, and every single one of those degrees was aimed directly at Dylan's forehead through the windshield of a 1994 Ford Econoline that had just coughed, shuddered, and flatlined like a patient nobody bothered to resuscitate. He turned the key. Click. Nothing. Turned it again. Click, 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 click. The starter motor was grinding against something that no longer wanted to cooperate. Horns started immediately. Not polite little taps. These were full-fisted, lean on the steering wheel, move your junk blasts from every direction. A guy in a lifted Silverado behind him stuck his head out the window and shouted something Dylan couldn't quite make out, but the hand gesture was universal. Dylan put the van in neutral and got out. The asphalt was so hot he could feel it through the soles of his boots. He pushed. Alone. 210 pounds of man trying to move 4,000 pounds of dead Ford through an intersection while traffic split around him like he was a rock in a river, and everybody was in a real big hurry to get to wherever rocks don't exist. A lady in a Lexus laid on her horn as she swerved past, close enough that he felt the wind off her side mirror. He got the van to the shoulder. Barely. His back was drenched. His arms were shaking. He sat on the bumper and pulled out his phone, a prepaid track phone he bought at the Walgreens on Bel Air, and called a tow company. 45 minutes to an hour, the dispatcher said. I'm sitting on the side of Westthamer. 45 minutes to an hour, sir. Dylan hung up. He looked at the van. The paint was peeling. The right side mirror was held on with a hose clamp. The magnetic sign on the door, D. Garrett HVAC Services, was faded from sun damage, and one corner had curled up so it read D. Garrett Vac Services, which sounded like he cleaned carpets for a living. He felt small. That was the word. Not angry, not frustrated. Small. Like the whole city was a machine and he was just a stripped bolt that fell out and nobody noticed, and the machine kept running just fine without him. Then came the sound. He heard it before he saw it. That unmistakable rumble. A Harley-Davidson, not just any Harley, a fat boy. You could tell by the deep, lazy potato of the exhaust. It came rolling up Westthamer from the east, lane splitting like the traffic laws were suggestions written for lesser men. The rider was big, leather vest over a black t-shirt, arms covered in ink wraparound sunglasses, a cigarette tucked behind his ear like a carpenter's pencil. Christian. And on the back of that bike, with her arms wrapped around his waist and her chin resting on his shoulder and her hair streaming behind her like a dark flag of surrender, was Mia. They rode right past Dylan, close enough to see, close enough to smell the exhaust. And Mia, she had her head thrown back, laughing, not a polite laugh, not a that's funny laugh, a real laugh, an alive laugh. The kind that starts in your belly and climbs up through your chest, and blows out of your mouth like you just discovered what joy tastes like for the first time in your life. Dylan hadn't seen that laugh in 3 years. He watched them disappear down Westthamer, weaving through traffic, and the sound of that Harley faded the same way his marriage had been fading, slowly at first, then all at once, until there was nothing left but heat and silence and a broken-down van on the side of the road. He waited for the tow truck. He waited for 52 minutes. He had a lot of time to think. That night he brought it up. He didn't plan some big speech. He didn't rehearse lines in the mirror. He just sat at the kitchen table while Mia stood at the counter scrolling through her phone, a nicer phone than his, he noticed, a flip phone with a color screen that he certainly hadn't bought, and he said it plain. I saw you today. Her thumb stopped scrolling. What? On the bike. On Westthamer with Christian. The kitchen went quiet. The fridge hummed. A roach scuttled across the baseboard because this was Houston and every house had roaches no matter how clean you kept it, and disappeared behind the stove. Mia didn't deny it. That was the thing that surprised him. He'd expected lies. He'd expected it was just a ride, or we're just friends, or you're being paranoid. He'd prepared for all of those the way a boxer prepares for jabs. What he wasn't prepared for was the truth. She set her phone down, looked at him square, and said, Christian makes me feel alive, Dylan. You make me feel like I'm waiting to die. Let me say that again so it sinks in. You make me feel like I'm waiting to die. That sentence didn't just sting. It rewired something inside of him. It reached into his chest and rearranged the furniture and walked out without closing the door. Because how do you respond to that? What sentence in the English language do you pull out of your back pocket that counters, you make me feel like I'm waiting to die? He didn't say anything. He just sat there, hands flat on the table, staring at a water ring from a glass that had been there for days. Mia picked her phone back up and walked into the bedroom and closed the door. Dylan slept on the couch that night, the vinyl one that stuck to his skin. He lay there in the dark and replayed the scene on Westthamer over and over, the bike, the laugh, the leather, the wind, like a movie he didn't buy a ticket for but couldn't stop watching. The next day, he went to the supply yard on Telephone Road, Hosea's place. Lone Star HVAC Supply, a corrugated metal building surrounded by a chain-link fence and about 10,000 pounds of copper tubing, condenser coils, and refrigerant tanks. The kind of place that smelled like oil and rust and hard work. Jose Delgado was behind the counter, 55 years old, built like a fire hydrant. Silver hair buzzed close to his scalp. A tattoo on his forearm, 1st Cavalry Division from his tour in Vietnam. He was eating a breakfast taco from the taqueria next door and reading a Louis L. Amer paperback, because that's what Jose did every morning, tacos and cowboys. You look like roadkill, Jose said without looking up. Thanks. I mean it. You look worse than roadkill. You look like the stuff that's stuck to the roadkill. Dylan leaned on the counter. I need a starter solenoid for a 94 ecanoline. Jose flipped a page. That's not what you need. It's what I'm asking for. Jose set the book down, looked at Dylan the way only a man who's seen real war can look at a man who's losing a fake one. Kid, I've known you 4 years. You come in here every week looking a little more chewed up than the last time. And it ain't the work doing it. What's going on at home? Dylan stared at a rack of Schrader valves. Mia's been seeing someone. The biker. Dylan's head snapped up. How'd you? Because she came in here 2 weeks ago asking if I knew anyone selling a used bike, said it was for a friend. Jose took a bite of his taco. That woman is looking for a movie, kid. You're offering a documentary. She won't stick around for the credits. So what do? You stop trying to fix something that ain't broken, Dylan. It ain't broken, it's gone. There's a difference. Broken you can weld, gone is gone. Dylan bought the solenoid. Jose didn't charge him. That afternoon, while the van was still at the shop, Dylan walked to the Chase Bank on Bissonnet to pull cash for the repair. He stood at the ATM, punched in his PIN. Checked the savings account, the one with the $1,500 emergency fund they'd been building for 2 years. Slow deposits, $20 here, $50 there, birthday money from his mom in Beaumont, every spare dollar he could bleed from his paycheck after rent and gas and groceries. The screen blinked. Available balance, $0. He stared at it. Hit check balance again, $0. He went inside, talked to a teller, a young woman with acrylic nails and a name tag that said Patricia. She pulled up the account history and turned the monitor toward him. 3 withdrawals, all cash, all from an ATM on Richmond Avenue, which was nowhere near their house but was 2 blocks from the diner where Mia worked. $500 on July 28th. $500 on August 3rd. $500 on August 9th. All of it, every single penny. Gone. Dylan thanked Patricia, walked outside, stood on the sidewalk in the middle of a Houston afternoon with the heat rising off the concrete in visible waves and his whole financial safety net. His whole future, frankly, evaporated into thin air. He should have been furious. He should have driven to that diner and caused a scene. He should have called Mia right then and there and demanded an explanation. But he didn't, because Dylan Garrett didn't do confrontation. Dylan Garrett absorbed. Dylan Garrett swallowed it, pushed it down, and kept moving forward because that's what his father did and his father before him and every quiet man in the long lineage of quiet men who confused silence with strength. He walked back to the supply yard. Jose looked at him. What now? She took the money. Jose didn't even blink. All of it? All of it. Jose reached under the counter, pulled out a warm Shiner Bock and slid it across. Drink that. Then go home and start figuring out what your life looks like without her in it, because that's coming, kid, whether you're ready or not. Dylan drank the beer. It was warm and bitter, and it tasted like the truth. He knew before he opened the door. It was a Saturday, mid-August. The kind of Houston afternoon where the sky turns white and the air feels like it's been cooked in a pot. Dylan had been on a job since 6 in the morning, replacing a blower motor in a church off Alameda. And he'd stopped at a gas station on the way home to buy a bag of ice because the freezer had been acting up, and he figured if the AC was dead and the freezer was dying, the least he could do was keep the milk cold. He pulled into the driveway at 4418 Ridley Lane and noticed 2 things immediately. 1, the front door was open. 2, there were suitcases in the hallway, not packed neatly like someone going on a vacation, thrown together, clothes spilling out of the zippers. A shoe poking out of one side like a body trying to escape a grave. The big navy blue suitcase, the one they'd bought together at a Goodwill on West Park when they'd planned that trip to Galveston they never took, was stuffed so full that the seam was splitting. Dylan set the bag of ice on the porch railing. It started melting immediately. He stepped inside. The living room was half empty. The bookshelf that had held Mia's romance novels was bare. The candles were gone. The throw pillows were gone. Even the little ceramic cat figurine that had sat on the windowsill since they moved in, the one that wasn't really hers or his but had just kind of existed there like a neutral party in a war zone, was gone. She'd been thorough. She'd been planning this. Mia came out of the bedroom carrying a box. She was wearing a leather jacket, brand new. Black fitted with silver zippers that caught the light from the hallway fixture. In August, in Houston, a leather jacket, and Dylan knew with the certainty of a man who just checked a $0 bank account exactly where the money went. "What are you doing?" he asked, even though he knew. He asked because some part of him needed to hear her say it out loud, the way a doctor needs to say it's malignant before you start believing the tumor is real. Mia set the box down. She looked at him and there was something on her face he hadn't seen before. Not guilt, not sadness, it was relief. Pure, shameless, sunlight through the window relief, like a prisoner who just heard the cell door click open. "I'm leaving, Dylan." "Where? Does it matter?" "It matters to me," she laughed, not the alive laugh from the back of the Harley, a smaller one, dismissive, the kind of laugh you give a child who asks why the sky is blue when you're too tired to explain physics. "I'm going with Christian." And there it was, no sugarcoating, no "I need space." No, it's not you, it's me. Just the plain, undecorated truth, sitting in the middle of the hallway between the suitcases and the melting bag of ice. Dylan leaned against the wall, his work shirt was soaked through. Insulation dust was in his hair. His hands, always those hands, were black with grease and crisscrossed with fresh cuts from the blower motor job. "How long?" he asked. "How long what? You and him, how long?" She picked up the box again. "Long enough." From the bedroom he heard a sound, a whimper, then a bark. Then the scrabble of claws on hardwood floor, and Buster came bounding out, a 50-pound mutt, half lab, half something nobody could identify, brown and white with one ear that stood up and one that flopped over. He ran straight to Dylan and pressed his head against Dylan's shin the way he always did when he wanted to say hello. Dylan reached down and scratched behind the floppy ear. "You're taking the dog. Buster's mine. We got him together, and I'm taking him." Dylan looked at Buster. Buster looked up at Dylan with those dumb, trusting brown eyes. Then Dylan looked at the kitchen counter where Buster's heartworm medication sat next to the toaster. A 3-month supply. Expensive stuff, $30 a pop, that Dylan drove to the vet on Kirby every 90 days to pick up because heartworm in Houston wasn't a maybe. It was a when. Mia hadn't packed it. She'd packed the romance novels and the candles and the ceramic cat. She'd taken the throw pillows and the good towels and the photo of herself at the beach. But she'd left the dog's medicine sitting on the counter like it was a coupon for something she'd never use. She wanted the dog, but she didn't want the work of the dog. Dylan picked up the heartworm pills, held them out. "Don't forget these." Mia glanced at them. "Oh, right." She shoved them in the box without looking. Outside, a horn honked, not a truck horn, not a car horn. A motorcycle horn, that sharp little bleat that Harleys make, the one that sounds impatient even when it's just saying hello. Christian. Dylan walked to the front window and looked out. There he was, parked at the curb on that fat boy, engine idling, cigarette between his lips, one boot on the pavement like a kickstand made of leather and attitude. He didn't get off the bike. He didn't come to the door, he didn't offer to help carry a single bag, he just sat there, smoking, waiting, like a man picking up a pizza he'd ordered online. Mia grabbed the last suitcase. She stopped in the hallway, right in front of Dylan, close enough that he could smell her perfume, something new, something he'd never bought her, mixed with that same stale cigarette smoke that had been haunting him for weeks. She looked at him, and then she said it. The thing he'd replay in his head 10,000 times over the next 5 years. The sentence that would burn itself into his memory like a brand on cattle, that would wake him up at 3 in the morning in cold sweat, that would echo in every empty room he sat in for months afterward. "I'm leaving you for a real man, Dylan. Christian takes what he wants. You just ask for permission." She didn't yell it. She didn't spit it. She said it calm and measured, like she'd been rehearsing it in the bathroom mirror for a week. Like it was a line from one of those romance novels she loved so much, where the heroine finally breaks free from the boring husband and rides off into the sunset with the dangerous stranger. She picked up the suitcase, walked out the door, down the steps, down the cracked driveway. Christian didn't get off the bike to help. He took a last drag of his cigarette, flicked it into Dylan's dead grass, and reached back to strap the suitcase to the sissy bar with a bungee cord. Mia climbed on. Buster was shoved into a cardboard box strapped to the side, not a carrier, not a crate, a cardboard box with holes poked in the top. The dog whined. Nobody cared. The engine revved. The pipes screamed. And then they were gone, fishtailing slightly as they turned off Ridley Lane and headed south, the sound fading from a roar to a hum to nothing at all. Dylan stood in the driveway. He didn't scream. He didn't throw anything. He didn't chase the bike down the street or call her phone or collapse to his knees like they do in the movies. He just stood there. A 32-year-old man in a sweat-soaked work shirt, holding a bag of melted ice in one hand and nothing in the other, watching the empty road where his wife had just disappeared with a man who didn't help carry a single bag. And the strangest thing happened. A calm settled over him. Not peace, it was too raw for peace. Not acceptance that would come much later. But a calm, cold, quiet. The kind you feel when the thing you've been dreading for months finally happens and you realize that you're still standing. The ground didn't open up. The sky didn't fall. The world just kept turning and you were still on it, still breathing, still upright. The worst had happened, and he was still here. He walked back inside, closed the door. Looked at the half-empty house and the full ashtray and the bare bookshelf and the heartworm medication that Mia had left sitting on the counter after all. She'd forgotten it again, or she'd never cared to begin with. Dylan picked up the pill bottle, turned it over in his hands. Read the label. Administer monthly with food. He set it down gently like it was the last piece of a life that no longer existed. Then he sat on the vinyl couch, which was now entirely his in the silence of a house that finally had nothing left to take, and he stared at the dead AC unit in the window, and he waited. For what, he didn't know. But he waited. The landlord didn't waste time. His name was Ray Hutchins. 60-year-old retired plumber from Pasadena, the Texas one, not the California one, with a gut that hung over his belt like a sandbag and a personality to match. He showed up on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after Mia left, holding a clipboard and a look that said he wasn't here to chat. "You're 2 months behind, Dylan." Dylan was standing in the kitchen in boxers and a t-shirt, pouring tap water into a coffee mug because the coffee maker was one of the things Mia had taken. "I know, Ray. You know, good. So you also know I got a waiting list for this unit. Family from Alif ready to move in next week. 3 kids. They got first and last month's deposit. I'll get you the money." "When?" "End of the month." Ray looked around the half-empty house, saw the bare walls, the suitcase-shaped scuff marks on the hallway floor, the ashtray still sitting on the counter. He wasn't a stupid man. "She left, huh?" Dylan didn't answer. "Son, I'm sorry about that. I really am, but rent's rent. I need you out by Friday." 3 days. That's what 5 years of paying on time got you. 3 days and a clipboard. Dylan packed what he had left into 4 garbage bags and the back of his work van, which Jose had helped him fix with a starter solenoid and a string of profanity that would have made a sailor blush. The van ran now, but it ran rough, like a man after a bar fight, upright but not exactly winning. He drove down the Gulf Freeway to a motel called the Bluebonnet Inn, which was neither blue nor an inn. It was a cinder block rectangle off the service road, sandwiched between a tire shop and a laundromat with a neon sign missing 2 letters so it read BL Bonnet IN, $29 a night. Weekly rate, $150, cash only. The room smelled like bleach and regret. 1 bed, 1 lamp. A TV bolted to the wall that only got 4 channels. A bathroom where the shower handle came off in your hand if you turned it too hard. Dylan set his garbage bags in the corner, sat on the bed. The mattress was thin as a promise, and the springs creaked like they were making a formal complaint. This was it. This was the bottom. 32 years old, sitting in a $29 motel room. Wife gone, dog gone, savings gone, apartment gone. The only things he had left in the world were a broken van, a bag of hand tools, and a pair of scarred, grease-stained hands that couldn't hold onto anything except wrenches and pipe fittings. He looked at those hands now, turned them over, palms up, then palms down. The calluses were thick as shoe leather. The knuckles were permanently swollen. There was a scar across his left thumb from a condenser fan blade 2 years ago, and another across his right palm from a piece of flashing that got him on his first solo job. These hands had fixed 1,000 machines, had wired 100 thermostats, had soldered enough copper to build a small bridge, but they couldn't fix a marriage. They couldn't hold a woman. They couldn't do the one thing that actually mattered. He reached into the second garbage bag and pulled out a bottle, Jack Daniels, half full. He'd bought it 6 months ago for a poker night that never happened because Mia didn't want his friends over and Dylan didn't push it because Dylan never pushed anything. He cracked it open, took a sip, then a longer one. The whiskey burned going down and settled in his stomach like a warm coal, and for exactly 4 seconds nothing hurt. He took another drink, and another. The room was quiet except for the rattle of the wall AC unit, which, ironically, worked fine, and the occasional rumble of a truck on the freeway. The lamp threw a yellow circle on the ceiling that looked like a spotlight for someone who'd run out of things to perform. He held the bottle up to the light. Amber, honest, the most reliable thing in the room. He was about halfway to the bottom when his pager went off. The pager. A Motorola Advisor, clipped to his belt even now, even at rock bottom, because that's who Dylan was. A man who carried his tools to his own funeral just in case someone needed a thermostat replaced on the way to the cemetery. He looked at the number, didn't recognize it, but the prefix was 713, Houston proper, and the suffix ended in 0, which usually meant a business or institution. He picked up the motel phone, a beige rotary that weighed about 4 pounds, and dialed the number. Magnolia Oaks Senior Living, this is Denise. Yeah, somebody paged me. This is Dylan Garrett, HVAC. Oh, thank God, Mr. Garrett, our AC system went down about an hour ago. The whole East Wing. We've got 42 residents over there, most of them over 80. It's 2 in the morning and it's still 90 degrees outside. We've been calling every number in the book and nobody's answering. Dylan looked at the bottle in his hand, then at the door, then at the bottle again. 42 people over 80, no air conditioning, in Houston in August. At 2 in the morning, he set the bottle on the nightstand. I'll be there in 30 minutes. He changed into his work shirt, laced up his boots, grabbed his tool bag. Walked out of the Bluebonnet Inn into the thick, wet, middle-of-the-night Houston air, where the streetlights had halos from the humidity, and the freeway hummed in the distance like the world was snoring. The van started on the 3rd try. He drove. Magnolia Oaks was a 1-story brick building on the south side, tucked behind a row of live oaks draped in Spanish moss. The east wing was dark. He could see 2 nurses standing outside with flashlights, fanning themselves with clipboards. A woman met him at the door, Denise, round face, reading glasses on a chain, the kind of nurse who looked like she hadn't slept since 1998. The compressor's out back, she said. It just stopped. No warning, the whole wing is an oven. Show me. She led him through the east wing. He walked past open doorways. Inside each room, elderly residents were lying in beds with damp washcloths on their foreheads. Thin blankets pushed aside. Fans plugged in but just pushing hot air around. A woman in room 114 was crying softly. A man in room 118 was sitting upright, confused, calling for someone named Dorothy who probably hadn't been alive in years. Dylan's chest tightened. Not with sadness, with something sharper, something that felt like purpose grabbing him by the collar and saying, "Pay attention. This is why you know how to do what you do." He went outside, found the condenser unit, an old carrier, 20-ton commercial system probably installed in the mid-80s. He pulled the panel. The contactor was welded shut, stuck in the closed position, which meant the compressor had been running non-stop until it overheated and the thermal overload cut it off. He replaced the contactor with one from his van, reset the overload, checked the refrigerant pressure low but serviceable. He'd need to come back for a full charge, but for now it would hold. 22 minutes. That's all it took. 22 minutes of work with those beat-up, scarred, grease-stained hands, and the air started flowing again. He walked back through the east wing. The vents were blowing. The temperature was dropping. The woman in room 114 had stopped crying. The man in room 118 had lain back down, his eyes closed, his breathing steady. Denise met him at the front desk with a check. "Mr. Garrett, you are a lifesaver. I mean that literally." Dylan looked at the check, looked at the hallway, looked at his hands. "Can I use your restroom?" he asked. "Of course." He went into the staff bathroom, closed the door, and stood at the sink and stared at himself in the mirror. Bloodshot eyes, stubble, whiskey on his breath. A man who 40 minutes ago was drinking himself to sleep in a motel room and feeling sorry for himself while 42 elderly people were suffocating in the heat because nobody else would answer the phone. But he answered. He always answered. That was the thing Mia never understood. She called him passive, called him a pushover, called him a man who just asks for permission. But what she never saw, what people like her never see, is that the man who shows up at 2 a.m. to fix an air conditioner for people he's never met is not weak. He's not passive. He's the only kind of man that actually matters when the temperature hits 100 degrees and the machines stop working. Dylan splashed water on his face, dried it with a paper towel, walked back to his van. He didn't go back to the motel, not yet. He drove to a 24-hour pawn shop on Harrisburg Boulevard, the kind of place with bars on the windows and a guy behind the counter who looked like he'd been there since the building was new. Dylan pulled off his wedding ring, held it under the fluorescent light. White gold, nothing fancy. He'd bought it at a Zales in the Galleria with money he'd saved for 6 months. Mia had wanted a bigger one, always wanted bigger, always wanted more, always wanted the thing that was just out of reach, but she'd accepted it with a smile that he now realized had never quite reached her eyes. "What'll you give me for this?" he asked the pawn guy. The man inspected it with a loupe. "120. It cost me 800, and a gallon of milk costs $3. Welcome to the pawn business." Dylan took the 120. He drove to the supply yard. Jose wouldn't be there for another 3 hours, but Dylan had a key. He let himself in, walked down the aisles of copper fittings and refrigerant tanks, and found what he was looking for on the top shelf of row 7. A professional-grade digital gauge manifold. Yellow jacket brand, 4-valve, the real deal, not the Harbor Freight knockoff he'd been using since he started. The one the serious technicians used. The one that told you exactly what was happening inside a system, pressures, temperatures, superheat, subcool, with numbers you could trust. It cost $115. He had 120. He bought it, held it in his hands, felt its weight. The brass fittings were cold and smooth and precise, and they felt more real than the ring ever did. He stood alone in the dark supply yard with $5 in his pocket, a new gauge manifold in his hands, and the taste of whiskey still fading on his tongue. "No more noise," he whispered, to himself. To the empty aisles. To the version of Dylan Garrett who had spent the last 3 years swallowing insults and ignoring cigarette smoke and pretending that a motorcycle revving 2 streets over was just a stranger passing through. Just work. He put the manifold in his tool bag, zipped it shut, walked to his van. The sun was coming up over the east side of Houston. Orange and gold and merciless, already promising another 100-degree day, already daring every machine in the city to break down and every man to break with them. But Dylan wasn't broken. Cracked, sure, dented, scarred across the knuckles and empty in the wallet and sleeping in a motel that charged by the week. But not broken. He started the van. It caught on the first try this time, which felt like some kind of sign, though he wasn't the type to believe in signs. He pulled onto the freeway, merged into the early morning traffic, headed toward whatever job was waiting for him next, whatever attic needed crawling into, whatever compressor needed resurrecting, whatever stranger needed a man who showed up when no one else would. The AC in the van didn't work. It hadn't worked in months. Hot air blasted through the vents, and the steering wheel was already warm under his scarred hands. But Dylan rolled down the window and let the Houston morning in, all of it, the heat and the noise and the diesel and the daylight, and he drove. Not away from something, toward it. September 2003 came in screaming. If you've never lived through a Gulf Coast hurricane, let me paint the picture for you. First comes the sky. It doesn't just darken, it turns this sick, bruised green like someone punched the atmosphere in the jaw. Then comes the wind, not the nice kind that blows your hat off at the beach. The kind that rips stop signs out of the ground and throws patio furniture through bedroom windows like it's got a personal grudge. The storm hit Galveston first, then crawled north toward Houston with all the subtlety of a freight train. Category 2, sustained winds of 105 miles per hour. And the rain, Lord, the rain, it didn't fall. It moved sideways, sheets of it, walls of it. Like someone turned the entire Gulf of Mexico upside down and poured it directly onto Harris County. By the time the eye passed and the back half rolled through, half the city was underwater. Power lines were down in every neighborhood from the Heights to Pearland. Trees were lying across roads like barricades. And every air conditioning system within 60 miles of the coastline had either flooded, shorted out, or gotten smacked by debris hard enough to crack the condenser coils. In other words, it was the worst week of most people's lives. For Dylan Garrett, it was an opportunity, not because he wanted people to suffer. He wasn't that guy. But he'd spent the last 13 months grinding, sleeping in his van 3 or 4 nights a week, taking every job that came through his pager, driving from Cypress to Clear Lake and back in a single day, and he'd built a rhythm. A machine. The man was a machine now, and machines don't panic when the power goes out. They just switch to backup. He was parked at the Lone Star Supply Yard on Telephone Road when the storm hit. Jose had boarded up the windows with plywood 2 days earlier because Jose had been through worse in the Mekong Delta, and a Category 2 didn't impress him. "You staying or going?" Jose asked, handing Dylan a thermos of coffee. They were sitting on folding chairs behind the counter while the wind screamed outside and the corrugated roof sounded like a drum set in a tornado. "Staying," Dylan said. "Good answer. Every other tech in this city is already halfway to San Antonio. Saw Patel's crew loading up yesterday. Rodriguez packed his family into a U-Haul. Even Big Tommy from Stafford said he's sitting this one out." "Good for them," Jose studied him. "You know what's gonna happen when this thing passes, right? Every rich homeowner from River Oaks to Memorial is gonna pick up their phone and start calling, and every number they dial is gonna ring out, except yours." Dylan took a sip of coffee. It was black and burnt and tasted like survival. "That's the idea. And what are you gonna charge them?" "Because I'm telling you right now, Kid Patel will be back in a week charging triple. Rodriguez will double his rates minimum. This is the gold rush. This is when you cash in." Dylan set the thermos down, looked Jose dead in the face. "I'm charging the same rate I always charge." Jose blinked. "Come again, 65 an hour, same as always." "Dylan, son. I love you like my own kid, but are you out of your mind? You could charge 200 an hour right now, and these people would write the check with a smile. And they'd remember it." Jose went quiet. "They'd remember me as the guy who squeezed them when they were desperate," Dylan said. "Or they can remember me as the guy who showed up when nobody else did and charged a fair price. Which one gets me a call next summer when their system needs a tune-up? Which one gets me a referral to their neighbor?" Jose leaned back in his folding chair. It creaked under him. He rubbed his jaw, a thing he did when he was processing something he didn't want to admit was smart. "You're playing the long game. Only game worth playing." The storm passed on a Thursday. Dylan was on the road by Friday at dawn. He worked 20-hour days, slept in the van. 8 gas station burritos from the Buc-ee's on I-10 and protein bars he bought in bulk from Sam's Club. He kept a gallon jug of water on the passenger seat and a roll of paper towels tucked behind the visor, and that was his life. Drive, fix, invoice, drive, fix, invoice. The calls came in waves. First the emergencies, flooded condensers, shorted compressors, units that got hit by falling branches. Then the secondary calls, people whose systems survived the storm but couldn't handle the load once the humidity spiked, and every house on the block fired up at the same time. His first call was in River Oaks. A woman named Gloria Tran, mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of house that had a circular driveway and a fountain in the front yard. Her whole house train system was dead. Flooded control board. Dylan replaced the board in 45 minutes. Gloria handed him a glass of sweet tea and asked what she owed. $160 for the part, $65 for the hour, $225 total. Gloria stared at him. "That's it." "Yes, ma'am. The last man I called before he stopped answering quoted me $900. "Well, I'm not him," Gloria Tran told her neighbor. Her neighbor told the HOA president. The HOA president told every homeowner in a 3-block radius. Within 2 weeks, Dylan's pager was going off so often he had to buy a second one. The honest tech. That's what they started calling him, not to his face, but he heard it secondhand. Jose told him first. "Lady at the bank called me looking for you, said her friend in West University recommended the honest tech." I said, "Ma'am, his name is Dylan." She said, "I know what I said." Dylan hired Jose officially in October. The old man had been retired for 2 years, supposedly, but retirement had made him restless and mean. He needed a mission. Dylan gave him one. "I need someone to answer the phones, schedule the jobs, order the parts, and tell me when I'm being stupid," Dylan said. "I've been doing that last part for free," Jose said. "Might as well get paid." They filed the paperwork at the Harris County Clerk's office on a Tuesday afternoon. Dylan's Climate Control LLC. Jose wanted to call it Garrett and Delgado, but Dylan shook his head. "Your name, your risk, your company," Jose said. "Our company, your name goes on the checks too." Jose signed the papers without another word. But Dylan caught him smiling in the truck on the way home, a small, private smile, like a man who just remembered what it felt like to matter. By December, the numbers told a story Dylan still had trouble believing. He sat in the supply yard office, which was now their office, with a yellow legal pad and a calculator. $53,000 net profit. After expenses, gas, parts, Jose's salary, insurance, and the weekly rate at the Bluebonnet in where Dylan was still living because he hadn't had time to find a real apartment. $53,000, more money than he'd made in any 2 years combined as a solo tech. Jose was leaning in the doorway, eating a taco from the place next door. So what are you gonna do with it? Dylan had thought about this. A new apartment, sure, maybe a decent bed, maybe some clothes that didn't smell like refrigerant, maybe even a truck that started on the first try and had functioning air conditioning. I'm buying a second work truck, he said. Jose stopped chewing. You're what? A truck, used probably, F-250 maybe, something that can haul a condenser unit, and I'm hiring a crew. 2 guys to start. You're not buying yourself anything, not even a decent pair of boots. Dylan, the sole on your left boot is held on with Gorilla Glue. I watched you put it on this morning. Boots don't make money, Jose. Trucks do. Jose shook his head, took another bite of his taco. You know, when my wife left me back in '84, I went the other direction, bought a Corvette, red. Drove it for 6 months and realized I was still sleeping alone, just doing it faster. Dylan allowed himself a small laugh. It felt foreign in his mouth, like a language he was relearning. I don't need a Corvette. No, you need a life. I need a fleet. He bought the truck the following week. A white 2001 Ford F-250 from a fleet auction in Pasadena. Dented tailgate, 140,000 miles, and an AC system that actually worked. He had magnetic signs made Dylan's climate control and stuck them on both doors. Then he stood in the parking lot of the supply yard and looked at his 2 trucks sitting side by side. 2 trucks. 2. 13 months ago, he'd been sitting in a $29 motel room with a bottle of Jack Daniels and an empty bank account, and a wedding ring he'd have to pawn just to buy a tool. And now he had 2 trucks, a business partner, and a reputation that was spreading across Houston's wealthiest zip codes faster than he could keep up. He didn't celebrate, didn't take a picture. Didn't call anyone. He just stood there for a minute, hands in his pockets, those hands, scarred across every knuckle, still rough, still worker's hands, but steadier now, and then he got in the old van and drove to his next job. Now, I need to tell you about Mia. Not because Dylan was thinking about her. He wasn't. That was the strange thing. The woman who'd burned his life to the ground had become a distant signal, like a radio station you drive out of range of and eventually stop trying to tune in. But the story doesn't end just because you stop listening. Mia and Christian were living in a single-wide trailer off Highway 90 in Rosenberg, about 45 minutes southwest of Houston. The trailer belonged to a buddy of Christian's, a guy named Dex who worked at a body shop and charged them $400 a month in rent, which was generous until you saw the place. The freedom Mia had chased was smaller than she'd imagined. Smaller, louder, and a lot less romantic. The Harley was parked outside, sure, but it needed a new clutch cable that Christian couldn't afford. The leather jacket she'd bought with Dylan's savings hung in a closet that smelled like mildew. And the arguments, God, the arguments were constant, not the cold, quiet kind she'd had with Dylan. These were loud, plates breaking, doors slamming, neighbors calling in complaints. Christian hadn't worked in 5 months. He called it between opportunities. Mia called it what it was once and got a bruised wrist for her trouble. She worked doubles at a diner in Sugar Land now. Different diner, same plates, same tips, same sore feet. She came home to a trailer that smelled like motor oil and stale beer, and a man who sat on the couch watching motorcycle races on a TV with a cracked screen. But she stayed. Because leaving meant admitting she was wrong, and Mia wasn't built for that. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Back in Houston, Dylan didn't know any of this, and if he had, he would have done exactly what he did every other night. Gone to work. 2 years can change a man if he lets it. By the spring of 2005, Dylan's climate control had gone from 2 trucks and a dream to something that looked, from the outside, like an actual company. 12 employees. 6 trucks, all white, all with the logo, all with functioning AC in the cabs because Dylan insisted on it. An office in a strip mall on Hillcroft, between a nail salon and a tax preparer with a glass door and a real sign and everything. But it was the pivot that changed things. Residential work was steady, profitable, safe, but the money, the real money, was in commercial contracts, office buildings, medical centers, strip malls. The systems were bigger, the invoices were fatter, and the clients didn't haggle over $20 diagnostic fees the way homeowners did. Problem was, commercial clients didn't hire a guy in a stained work shirt who showed up in a dented van. They hired companies with offices and letterheads and people who wore suits. Enter Lee Dawson. Dylan found her through a Craigslist ad. She'd posted her resume in the services offered section with the subject line, "Office manager, organized, ruthless, don't waste my time." He almost scrolled past it. Then he read it again and thought, that's exactly what I need. She showed up for the interview in a black blazer and heels, carrying a leather portfolio that had more structure than Dylan's entire filing system, which at that point was a cardboard box labeled stuff in Jose's handwriting. "So," she said, sitting across from him in the strip mall office. "You're Dylan." "I am." "You run a 12-man HVAC operation out of a room that smells like fish sauce from the restaurant next door." "Nail salon, actually. The fish sauce is from the pho place on the other side. And you want to land commercial contracts." "That's the plan." Lee opened her portfolio. Inside was a printed spreadsheet. She'd researched his company before the interview. Revenue estimates, competitor analysis, market share in the Houston HVAC space. "You're underpriced by about 20%, she said. "Your trucks aren't branded consistently. I drove past 2 of them on the way here and one had the logo crooked. You have no website, no business cards, and based on what I can see," she looked him up and down, "you're planning to pitch to building managers wearing that." Dylan looked down at his polo shirt. It was clean, mostly. "What's wrong with this?" "Everything. You're selling climate control to people who spend 6 figures on their HVAC systems. They want to see someone who looks like he controls climates, not someone who installs them." Jose, who was sitting in the corner pretending to read a newspaper, snorted into his coffee. "When can you start?" Dylan asked. "Yesterday." She pulled a pen from her portfolio. "First order of business, we're getting you a suit." "I don't wear suits." "You do now. Second order, I need access to all your accounts, scheduling software, and vendor contacts." "I don't have scheduling software." "I know, that's why I brought this." She slid a printed proposal across the desk. Operational overhaul. New software, rebranded trucks, a website, and a client presentation deck. Total cost, $8,000. Dylan stared at the number. $8,000? You'll make it back on your first commercial contract, I guarantee it." "How can you guarantee that?" Lee leaned forward. "Because I already have a lead. Friend of mine manages facilities for a medical office complex on Westthamer. 32 units. Full maintenance contract. She's been shopping for a new vendor because her current guy keeps missing appointments." She paused. "But she's not going to sign with a company whose owner shows up in a pickup truck wearing a polo with a mustard stain on the collar." Dylan looked down again. There was, in fact, a faint yellow spot near the second button. "Fine," he said. "Get me the suit." The suit changed things, not because it made Dylan someone different, but because it made other people see what was already there. The confidence, the competence, the quiet authority of a man who knew every nut and bolt inside the machines he was selling contracts for. The medical complex signed within 2 weeks, then a property management firm in the Galleria area, then a law office downtown, then a school district in Fort Bend County that needed 26 rooftop units serviced quarterly. Lee ran the office with surgical precision. She answered every call by the second ring. She sent invoices the same day a job was completed. She tracked every truck on a whiteboard that took up an entire wall with color-coded magnets for each crew, and she could tell you at any moment where every single employee was, what they were doing, and whether they were on schedule. She also didn't tolerate nonsense. From anyone, which brought them to Marcus. Marcus Cole was a guy Dylan had known since his solo days. They'd met at a supply house, swapped stories, helped each other on a couple of jobs. When Dylan started hiring, Marcus was one of the first guys he brought on. Not because Marcus was the best tech, he was average, honestly, but because he was a friend. And Dylan, who'd lost his wife and his home and his dog and his dignity in the span of 72 hours, was hungry for loyalty. Mistake. Lee found the tickets on a Tuesday. 3 parking violations and a red light camera ticket, all on company truck number 4, all from the same 2-week stretch in January. The truck had been assigned to Marcus for a residential callback in Montrose, but the tickets were from midtown bars. At 2 in the morning, on weeknights. She put the printout on Dylan's desk without a word. He picked it up. Read it, set it down. Bring him in, Dylan said. Marcus showed up an hour later, grinning. He was always grinning. That was his thing, the big, easy smile, the backslap, the brother this and man that. He walked into Dylan's office and dropped into the chair like he owned it. What's up, D? Lee said you wanted to see me. Dylan slid the printout across the desk. Explain these. Marcus looked at them. The grin dimmed but didn't die. "Aw man, look, I was helping a buddy move some furniture. Borrowed the truck for a couple hours, no big deal. At 2 a.m. in Midtown, he lives in Midtown. 3 times in 2 weeks." Marcus shifted in the chair. "Come on, do we go way back? It's a couple of tickets, I'll pay them off." Dylan leaned forward. His hands were flat on the desk, palms down, fingers spread, still and deliberate. Not the shaking, bleeding hands from 3 years ago. Different hands now, same scars, different posture. "Marcus, that truck has my company's name on it, my name. Every time you drive it drunk to a bar at 2 in the morning, that's my reputation parked outside. I wasn't drunk, you're done." The grin died completely. "You serious right now? Pick up your last check from Lee on Friday." Marcus stood up, his jaw was tight. "You know what? You've changed, man. You used to be cool, you used to be one of us. Now you're sitting behind a desk in a suit acting like you're better than everybody." "I'm not better than everybody, Marcus. I'm just done being taken advantage of." Marcus left. He slammed the door hard enough to rattle the blinds. Jose, who'd been listening from the break room, appeared with 2 cups of coffee. He set one on Dylan's desk. "That was the right call," he said. "I know. Didn't ask if you knew, asked if you're okay with it." Dylan picked up the coffee, took a sip. It was too hot, but he drank it anyway. The old me would have let it slide. Given him another chance, pretended it was fine because I didn't want the confrontation. "And the new you? The new you just fired his friend." Dylan set the cup down, "and he's fine with it." 3 months later, the rumors started trickling in. Dylan didn't go looking for information about Mia. He didn't ask. He didn't Google her. He didn't drive past old places hoping for a glimpse. But Houston is a big city that acts like a small town, and when you work in enough houses across enough neighborhoods, people talk. It was a customer in Alif, a woman whose ductwork Dylan's crew was replacing. She knew Mia from a diner in Sugar Land, mentioned it casually while handing him a glass of water. "That girl's been working herself to the bone, doubles every day." Said her boyfriend got arrested for fighting some guy outside a pool hall on Richmond. She's been scraping together money for bail. Dylan drank the water, didn't respond. The customer kept talking the way customers do when they don't realize they've stepped on a landmine. "Some people just pick the wrong ones, you know?" "Yeah," Dylan said. "They do." He drove home that night, a real apartment now, a 1-bedroom off West Park, nothing fancy but clean and quiet and his, and sat on the couch and let the information settle. Christian arrested, Mia working doubles to bail him out. The movie had turned into a horror film, and the leading man had turned out to be the villain all along. Just like Jose said, Dylan felt something stir in his chest. A low, dull ache. Not love, that wire had been cut clean. It was pity. The same pity you'd feel watching someone drown who'd been told 100 times not to swim in that part of the river. He could help. He had the money. He could make one phone call, pay the bail, pull her out of whatever pit she'd dug herself into. He picked up the phone, held it. Then he put it down. Walked to his kitchen table where a folder sat with a real estate listing inside. A foreclosed property in a neighborhood west of Bel Air. An old estate built in the 70s, neglected for a decade, structurally sound but cosmetically destroyed. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, a half-acre lot with mature oaks. The asking price was a steal. Post-hurricane foreclosures were everywhere, and this one had been sitting for months. Dylan opened the folder, looked at the photos, saw past the peeling wallpaper and overgrown yard the way he saw past corroded coils and burnt contactors. He saw what it could be, what he could make it. He picked up the phone again, called the listing agent. "I want to make an offer," he said. The pity went right back where it came from, into the ground, into the foundation, into the house he was going to build with the same hands that couldn't hold a marriage but could hold a wrench steady at 3 in the morning when nobody else would answer the phone. He started working on the house that weekend, every Saturday and Sunday from dawn until his arms gave out. He ripped out drywall, laid new flooring, rewired the electrical panel, and the HVAC system. He installed that himself, obviously. A top-of-the-line Carrier Infinity. variable speed, zoned for every room. The kind of system that whispered instead of shouted, that kept every corner of the house at exactly the temperature you wanted, all day, all night, without complaint. He knelt on the floor of what would become the living room, soldering a copper line, and realized something. This was the first thing he'd ever built that was entirely his. Not for a customer, not for Mia, not for anyone, just his. His hands were steady. The solder flowed clean. Outside, the sun was setting on another Houston evening, turning the sky orange and pink over a half-finished house that nobody knew about yet. But they would. The pawn shop was on Telephone Road, 2 blocks south of Jose's supply yard. Place called Quick Cash Loans and More, which was the kind of name that told you everything about the clientele and nothing about the dignity of the transactions happening inside. Dylan was there for copper, not inside the pawn shop. He was at the supply depot next door, picking up a bulk order of 3/4-inch copper line for a retrofit job in the Heights. He'd parked the truck, the new one, the F-350 with the company logo and the clean white paint, right along the curb. He was loading pipe into the truck bed when he saw the bike. It was parked in front of the pawn shop, a Harley-Davidson Fat Boy, or what used to be one. The chrome was gone, replaced by a dull, oxidized gray. The front fender had a dent the size of a grapefruit. The leather seat was cracked and sun-bleached, and the left mirror was missing entirely. The handlebars were wrapped in duct tape where the grip had worn through. He knew that bike. Knew it the way you know a face from a bad dream. You can't always place it immediately, but your body reacts before your brain catches up. His stomach tightened. His hands stopped moving on the copper pipe. That was Christian's bike. Dylan stood very still. He looked at the pawn shop window. The glass was smudged and covered in neon signs, WE Buy Gold and Cash for Electronics, but through the gaps he could see inside. And there she was. Mia was standing at the counter. Her back was to the window, but he knew her silhouette the way a carpenter knows the grain of oak, the set of her shoulders. The way she stood with her weight on her left foot. Her hair was different, shorter, duller, pulled back with a rubber band instead of a clip. She was holding something up to the man behind the counter, something small, something that caught the overhead fluorescent light and threw a brief, sad sparkle. A necklace. Dylan recognized it instantly. A thin gold chain with a small heart pendant. He'd bought it for her second birthday together at a jewelry kiosk in the Sharpstown Mall. Cost him $140, which was a lot back then. She'd worn it every day for 2 years. Said she loved it. Said it was the most thoughtful gift anyone ever gave her. Now she was sliding it across a glass counter to a stranger in exchange for whatever they'd give her. He couldn't see her face, didn't need to. Her posture told the whole story. Shoulders curved inward, head slightly bowed, the posture of someone who had run out of things to sell and was now selling the things that used to mean something. "Don't!" Jose's voice, right behind him. Dylan hadn't even noticed him approach. Jose had walked over from the supply yard, probably saw Dylan frozen at the truck bed like a man who'd spotted a ghost. "Don't what?" Dylan said. "Don't go in there." "I wasn't going to. You were thinking about it. I can see it on your face. You've got that look, the same look you had 3 years ago when you'd come into the yard all chewed up and I'd ask what happened and you'd say nothing, like a liar." Dylan kept watching the pawn shop window. Mia was putting something in her purse now. Bills, not many from the look of it. She turned slightly and he caught her profile. She looked tired, not just long day at work tired. Tired in the bones, in the skin, the kind of tired that ages you 5 years in 2. There were lines around her mouth that hadn't been there before. Her cheeks were thinner, and there was something in the way she moved, careful, guarded, that reminded him of the elderly residents at Magnolia Oaks that night. People conserving energy because they didn't have much left. "Jose, I know what you're about to say. She looks rough. I know what she looks like, and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking you could walk in there, buy that necklace back, hand it to her, and maybe fix one small thing in her broken life because that's what you do. You fix things, that's your whole identity." Dylan didn't deny it. Jose stepped closer, put a hand on Dylan's shoulder. His grip was firm, an old soldier's grip, the kind that says, "I'm not asking." "You can't save someone who jumped off the boat, son. You threw her a rope, she untied it, she jumped. And the water she's drowning in, she picked that ocean. You didn't push her." Dylan watched Mia walk out of the pawn shop. She didn't look left or right. She walked to the curb, pulled out a cell phone, and made a call. Waited. Whoever answered made her flinch. He could see it from 50 feet away, the way her head pulled back slightly like someone had snapped at her through the receiver. She hung up, stood there for a moment. Then she walked to a bus stop on the corner and sat down on the bench. She never looked at the white F-350 parked 40 feet away with Dylan's climate control printed on both doors. Never noticed the man standing at the truck bed with copper pipe in his hands and a past in his throat that he was trying very hard not to swallow. "Let's go," Jose said. Dylan loaded the last of the copper, closed the tailgate, got in the truck, started the engine. Pulled away from the curb and merged onto Telephone Road heading north. He didn't look in the rearview mirror, didn't slow down at the intersection, didn't circle the block. And the feeling that settled into his chest as he drove, it wasn't anger, wasn't sadness. Wasn't even the pity he'd felt months ago when he heard about Christian's arrest. It was indifference. Clean, weightless, absolute indifference. The kind you feel when a chapter ends and you realize you don't need to reread it. You just turn the page. "You good?" Jose asked from the passenger seat. "Yeah," Dylan said, and he meant it. For the first time since a motorcycle revved 3 streets over on an August night in 2002, he actually meant it. Jose reached over and turned on the radio. Tejano music. Loud. He tapped his knee to the beat and stared out the window, and neither of them mentioned Mir again for the rest of the day. Or the rest of the year, for that matter. Because the year got busy. A call came in the following Monday from a general contractor Dylan had done work for on 2 commercial jobs. The guy's name was Pete Salazar, a third-generation builder from San Antonio who'd relocated to Houston and had connections that ran so deep they hit bedrock. "Dylan, you sitting down?" "I'm driving, Pete. Pull over." Dylan pulled into a Whataburger parking lot. "Go ahead." "I just got off the phone with a procurement officer at the GSA, General Services Administration, federal government. They're looking for HVAC contractors for a string of federal buildings in the greater Houston area. Post offices, courthouses, VA facilities, multi-year maintenance contract." Dylan was quiet. "You hear me? Multi-year, federal, this is 7 figures, brother, minimum." "Why me? There's companies twice my size." "Because I recommended you." And because the GSA cares about 3 things: reliability, fair pricing, and not getting embarrassed by their contractors. You check all 3 boxes. You're the only guy I know who charged $65 an hour during a hurricane when everyone else was robbing people blind. 65 was my rate. And that's exactly why I'm calling you. They want a proposal by end of month. Can you do it? Dylan looked through the windshield at the Whataburger sign, an orange and white W glowing in the afternoon sun. He'd eaten 1,000 meals from that place. Brought me a chicken biscuits she never wanted. Fueled entire workdays on nothing but their honey butter and sweet tea. "I'll have it to you by Friday," he said. The proposal took 4 days. Lee put together the financials. Jose reviewed the technical specs. Dylan wrote the scope of work himself, at the kitchen table of his apartment, in longhand on a legal pad, because some things deserve the weight of a pen. They submitted on a Friday, got the call on a Wednesday. Dylan's climate control had been awarded a federal maintenance contract worth $1.2 million over 3 years. He sat in his office, the strip mall office that still smelled faintly of nail polish, and stared at the number on the award letter. Lee was standing in the doorway. Jose was sitting in the corner. "You're a millionaire," Lee said. "On paper. Paper's where it starts, boss. Reality follows." Jose said nothing. He just raised his coffee cup in a small, quiet toast and took a sip. That evening, Dylan drove to the supply yard. Alone. He unlocked the gate, walked down the aisles, past the copper fittings and the refrigerant tanks and the shelf where he'd bought that yellow jacket gauge manifold with pawn shop money 3 years ago, and he stood in the back lot under a sky full of Houston stars and breathed. Then he walked to his truck, opened the toolbox mounted to the bed, and checked his tool bag. It was still there. The gauge manifold, the wrenches, the multimeter, the screwdrivers. He was a millionaire on paper. He had 6 trucks and 12 employees and a federal contract and a foreclosed estate he was rebuilding with his own 2 hands. But the tool bag stayed in the truck, just in case. Because you never forget what it feels like to be the only guy who answers the phone at 2 in the morning. And you never stop being that guy. Not really. Not if you're Dylan Garrett. He closed the toolbox, drove home, went to sleep. Tomorrow there'd be more work. There was always more work, and that was fine. That was the whole point. The house was finished in March of 2007. 2 years of weekends. 2 years of ripped-out walls and sawdust clouds and trips to the Home Depot on West Bel Air, so frequent that the guy in the lumber section started calling him by name. 2 years of sore backs and paint-stained clothes, and the slow, stubborn, beautiful process of turning a neglected wreck into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine. 4 bedrooms. 3.5 baths. Hardwood floors throughout. A kitchen with granite countertops and stainless steel appliances, and a window over the sink that looked out onto a half-acre backyard with mature live oaks and a stone patio Dylan had laid himself, one flagstone at a time, on his hands and knees in the October sun. And the HVAC system. God, the HVAC system. A Carrier Infinity with a variable speed blower and 4 separate zones, each one controlled by its own thermostat, each one dialed in to within half a degree. The house breathed. That was the only way to describe it. The air moved through the rooms like a slow, invisible river, cool and clean and perfectly balanced, and the compressor outside was so quiet you'd have to press your ear to it to know it was running. Dylan had installed it himself. Every line, every fitting, every wire. And when he'd fired it up for the first time and stood in the living room and felt that clean, cold air wash over him, 68 degrees, not a degree more, not a degree less, he'd closed his eyes and thought, this is what control feels like. But the house was empty. Not needs furniture empty. It had furniture. Lee had insisted on hiring a decorator, a woman named Priya who came in with fabric swatches and mood boards and opinions about throw pillows that Dylan didn't understand but didn't argue with. The house was staged and styled and ready. It was empty of life. No footsteps. No voices. No dog barking at the mailman. Just room after room of perfect silence, which was peaceful for about 2 weeks and then started to feel like something else entirely. You need someone to take care of this place, Lee said. They were standing in the kitchen. Dylan was in jeans and a t-shirt, his weekend clothes, the ones he wore when he wasn't in the suit that Lee had weaponized into his professional identity. Lee was in her usual blazer heels, portfolio tucked under her arm, looking around the kitchen with the analytical eye of someone who saw problems before they existed. What do you mean? I mean you work 60 hours a week. You're not going to vacuum this place yourself. You're not going to dust the baseboards. You're not going to keep the bathrooms clean and the kitchen stocked and the laundry done. You need a housekeeper. I can do my own laundry. You wore the same shirt 3 days in a row last week. It was a clean shirt. It was the same shirt, Dylan. She opened her portfolio, of course she did, and pulled out a printout. There's an agency in Montrose, residential staffing. They vet candidates, do background checks, handle the payroll. You just tell them what you need. I don't want to interview people. You won't have to, I'll handle it. Just find someone who needs the work and will do a good job. I don't need fancy, I need reliable. Lee made the call that afternoon. The agency sent over a list of candidates within the week, a short stack of profiles with photos and availability and work history or lack thereof. Lee sat in the strip mall office, flipping through them. This one's overqualified. She managed a hotel in Galveston. She'll leave in 6 months. This one only works mornings. You need afternoons covered too. This one has 3 references from the same family, which is either great or suspicious. She paused on one. Mia M. Open availability, no references, says she's willing to do any household tasks including cooking and errands. Lee tapped the photo, a small, slightly grainy headshot of a dark-haired woman with tired eyes and a forced smile. She looks hungry, in the good way. Desperate people work hard. Lee had never heard Dylan talk about his ex-wife. He didn't discuss his past, didn't keep photos, didn't mention the name. As far as Lee knew, Dylan Garrett had materialized fully formed in 2003 during a hurricane like some kind of HVAC superhero with a tragic backstory he refused to narrate. She circled Mia's name, set the file aside, moved on with her day. Dylan found the file 3 days later. He came home early, unusual for him, but there was a gala that evening. Some Chamber of Commerce thing that Lee had signed him up for, the kind of event where men in expensive suits talked about synergy and market positioning, while eating shrimp cocktail and pretending they hadn't all started in garages and spare bedrooms just like he had. He needed to shower and change. He walked into the kitchen, tossed his keys on the counter, and saw the agency folder sitting next to the fruit bowl. He opened it without thinking. Lee must have left it for him to review, or she'd forgotten it. Either way, it was right there, the stack of profiles fanned out like a hand of cards. He flipped past the first three. The hotel manager. The morning-only woman, the one with suspicious references. Then he turned to the fourth page and his hand stopped. The photo was small, wallet-sized, printed on cheap paper, slightly pixelated around the edges. But he would have recognized that face from 100 yards through a dust storm. Mia, thinner than he remembered, the cheekbones sharper, the jaw more pronounced. Her hair was shorter, shoulder-length, flat, missing the volume it used to have. And her eyes, those eyes that used to flash with impatience and hunger and the restless energy of a woman who wanted more, always more, looked flat, dimmed, like someone had turned the brightness down and lost the remote. Mia M., no last name listed, open availability, no references, will do any household tasks. Dylan stood in his kitchen, the one he'd built with his own scarred hands, with the granite countertops and the stainless steel and the perfectly calibrated 68-degree air whispering through the vents. And he held a piece of paper with his ex-wife's face on it. And the world did that thing it does sometimes where it folds in half in the past and the present touch. His first instinct was to close the folder. Call Lee, tell her to pick someone else, anyone else. The hotel manager, the morning-only woman, the suspicious references. He didn't care, just not her, not Mia. Not the woman who'd stolen his savings and taken his dog and climbed on the back of a Harley-Davidson and told him he wasn't a real man, not in his house. Not in the one place on earth he'd built to be entirely, completely, irreversibly his. That instinct lasted about 4 seconds. Then the second one arrived. Quieter, darker, colder, curiosity. He wanted to know, not out of revenge, or at least that's what he told himself. He wanted to know if the real man had made her happy, if the movie she'd been chasing had a good ending. If the freedom and the leather and the Harley and the laughter with her head thrown back had delivered on its promise, or if it had done what Jose predicted all along and run out of credits. He picked up his phone, called Lee. Hey, boss, you getting ready for the gala? Because if you're about to tell me you're wearing the gray suit again, I swear, Lee. The agency file. The one you left on my counter. Right. I was going to finalize tomorrow. I'm leaning toward the Mia candidate. No references is a red flag, but she's available immediately and she's flexible on pay, which usually means send her in. Pause. Okay, when? Tomorrow. The gala's tonight. You'll be up late. Are you sure you want tomorrow, Lee? Send her in at 10. Got it. I'll tell the agency. Dylan paused. He could feel his heartbeat in his throat, steady but elevated, the way a gauge reads when the pressure's rising but the system hasn't tripped yet. One more thing, he said. Don't tell her who owns the house. Longer pause this time. Lee was sharp, too sharp sometimes. She could hear the frequencies in a conversation that most people missed, the way Dylan could hear the rattle in a compressor that told him the bearings were going before anyone else noticed. Is there something I should know? She asked. No, he said. Just don't tell her. Okay, boss, your house, your rules. He hung up, set the phone on the counter. Stood there in the cool, silent kitchen of the house he'd built from nothing, staring at a photo of the woman who had once told him he was nothing, and he waited for the feeling to come. Anger, triumph, vindication, anything. What came instead was a stillness. Deep and wide and cold like the air in a room with a perfect HVAC system, controlled, invisible, and completely under his command. Tomorrow, she'd walk up his driveway. She'd ring his bell. She'd step into his foyer and feel the cool air and smell the mahogany and see the photos on the wall, and she would know, the way you know a thing in your gut before your brain finishes processing it, that the man she'd left behind had built exactly the life she'd told him he was too small to deserve. Dylan picked up his suit jacket. Checked his reflection in the hallway mirror. Clean shirt, tailored fit. A face that had aged well because it had aged with purpose. His hands were still scarred, still rough in places that would never smooth out, but they were steady. They were clean, and they were his. He straightened his collar, headed for the gala. Tomorrow would take care of itself. The number 82 West Park bus dropped Mia off at the corner of Bel Air Boulevard and Renwick Drive at 9:41 on a Wednesday morning. She stood on the curb and checked the address on the folded piece of paper the agency had given her. She'd written it in pen on the back of a receipt from the Dollar General in Rosenberg, where she'd bought the blouse she was wearing. White, Polyester, $6. She tried to iron the collar in the motel bathroom that morning using the flat side of a hair straightener, and it mostly worked except for a crease on the left side that she kept tugging at with her fingers as she walked. The neighborhood was quiet. Not empty quiet, wealthy quiet. That particular silence that exists only in places where the landscaping costs more than most people's rent. The houses were set back from the street behind brick walls and wrought iron gates, with driveways that curved and disappeared behind hedgerows like they were hiding something expensive. She found the address, stopped. The gate was open. A long, paved driveway stretched ahead of her, lined on both sides with crepe myrtles in full pink bloom and beds of knockout roses so red and uniform they looked painted. The driveway had to be 100 yards at least, and at the end of it sat the house. She said it out loud before she could stop herself. "Oh my God!" It was massive. Not McMansion massive, not the bloated, plastic-looking houses in Katy with the 4-car garages and the fake stone facades. This was old money massive. Brick, 2 stories, white columns across the front porch, a portico over the entrance with lanterns on either side. Live oaks in the yard, the kind that take 50 years to grow, with branches so wide they shade the whole front lawn. The grass was green, not Houston in spring green, golf course green, sprinkler system green. Mia walked up the driveway, slowly. Her shoes, black flats, scuffed at the toes, the only pair she owned that didn't have a hole, clicked on the pavement with each step. She could hear birds, actual birds, singing in the crepe myrtles like they were hired for ambience. She thought, I wish I had a life like this, not I wish I lived here. That was too specific, too greedy. She'd lost the ability to wish for specific things a long time ago. Now she just wished in the general direction of better, the way you wish on a birthday candle when you're too tired to narrow it down. She reached the front door, rang the bell. Heard a deep, resonant chime on the other side, not a buzzer, not a ding-dong, a chime, like a church bell that went to finishing school. A woman answered. Late 20s, maybe 30, sharp face, blazer, heels, a clipboard tucked under one arm and a look that said she'd already formed an opinion and was waiting to see if Mia would confirm or contradict it. "Mia Miller," the woman said. "Yes, ma'am. I'm Lee. I manage the household and the business operations. Come in." Mia stepped through the door and immediately felt 2 things. First, the cold. Not someone turned the AC on cold, not window unit fighting the heat cold. This was engineered cold. 68 degrees, every molecule of air in perfect alignment, not a warm spot in sight. The kind of cold that Houston houses dream about and never achieve unless someone who truly understands climate control has laid hands on the system. The air was cool and clean and faintly sweet, like it had been filtered through something that cost more than Mia's last 3 paychecks combined. She hadn't felt air like this in 5 years. Not since she'd lived in a house where the window unit wheezed and died on an August night while a man in a sweat-stained work shirt tried to fix it by flashlight. Second, the smell. Lemon polish and mahogany, old wood and new money. The foyer floor was marble, actual marble, white with gray veining, and her scuffed flats looked like a confession against it. "Have a seat in the study," Lee said, gesturing down a hallway. "The homeowner will be with you shortly." "I thought I was meeting with you." "You're meeting with the owner. He prefers to personally approve all household staff." Have a seat." Mia walked down the hall. Her eyes moved across the walls without permission, cataloging details the way a starving person scans a buffet. Crown molding, recessed lighting, a console table with a vase of fresh-cut lilies, and photographs, framed photographs mounted in a clean row along the left wall. She stopped at the last one. It was a wide shot, professional. A man standing in front of a row of white trucks. She counted them without meaning to, her lips moving slightly, 20 trucks, all with matching logos, parked in a neat line outside a large commercial building. The man was center frame, fit, groomed, wearing a navy suit and a white shirt open at the collar. His arms were at his sides, relaxed, confident. He was looking directly at the camera with an expression that said nothing and everything at the same time. Mia squinted, something about his face. The jawline, the way he stood feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, solid. The way his hands hung at his sides, slightly curled like they were used to holding tools. Her brain offered the name and she rejected it. No, that's impossible. She kept walking, entered the study. It was paneled in dark wood with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a wide desk positioned near a window that looked out onto the backyard. The oaks, the stone patio, sprinklers throwing gentle arcs of water across the lawn. She sat in the leather chair across from the desk, folded her hands in her lap. Noticed they were shaking and pressed them together harder to stop it. Not because of nerves, she'd done job interviews before, plenty of them, but because the room felt too still, too quiet. The only sound was the AC, a low, constant, barely audible hum like the house was breathing. She waited 3 minutes, maybe 4, long enough for her to study the desk. Neat, organized. A laptop closed, a leather blotter, a pen holder with 2 pens, a manila folder with a yellow sticky note on the front that she couldn't read from this angle, and a small framed photo, this one personal, of an older man with silver hair and a younger man at what looked like a ribbon-cutting ceremony. She couldn't quite make out the younger man's face. Then she heard footsteps. Deliberate. Measured, the sound of hard-soled shoes on marble approaching from the hallway with the unhurried pace of someone who owned every square inch they were walking on. A man entered the study. He was wearing a charcoal suit, tailored, the kind that doesn't come off a rack, white shirt, no tie. His hair was shorter than she remembered, if this was who she thought it was, which it wasn't, which it couldn't be, and there was some gray at the temples. His shoulders were broader. He carried himself differently, straighter, heavier. Not heavier in weight, heavier in presence. Like gravity worked a little harder around him. He was holding a file, reading it. He didn't look up as he crossed the room, didn't acknowledge her. He walked behind the desk, pulled out the chair, sat down, and opened the file on the blotter with the calm, practiced efficiency of a man who conducted meetings like this all the time. Then he looked up, and Mia's entire body went cold in a house that was already 68 degrees. Those eyes, she knew those eyes, brown, quiet. The eyes of a man who used to stare at a dead AC unit in a window frame while she screamed at him about basic comfort. The eyes that had watched her walk out of a rental house on Ridley Lane with suitcases and a dog in a cardboard box and a kill shot still ringing in the hallway. But the eyes were different now. Steadier, harder. Not angry, that would have been easier to handle. They were calm. The way a machine is calm. The way a compressor is calm when it's running exactly the way it was designed to run. Her purse slipped off her lap and hit the marble floor with a sound that broke the silence like a gunshot. "Dylan!" He didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't blink. He looked at her the way you look at a file you've already read. "Hello, Mia." The silence lasted exactly long enough for Mia to realize she had no idea what to do with her face. She tried a smile. It came out wrong, lopsided, trembling, the kind of smile that arrives at a funeral and immediately wishes it had stayed home. Her eyes were already wet, and she hadn't even said a full sentence yet. Dylan closed the file, set it on the desk. Folded his hands, those hands, clean now, the scars still visible but faded to silver, the knuckles no longer swollen, the nails trimmed, no grease, no blood, no insulation dust, and looked at her the way a doctor looks at a chart. "Have a seat, Ms. Miller." Miller, her maiden name, not Garrett, which she'd carried for 3 years of marriage, not whatever she'd been going by since. Miller. The name she was born with, the name before him, the name that erased everything that had existed between them and drew a line in the marble floor that said, "We are strangers now." Mia bent down and picked up her purse. Her fingers fumbled with the clasp. She sat back in the chair and gripped the armrests. "Dylan, I didn't know this was your—" "The agency sent your profile." "Open availability, no references." He didn't raise his voice, didn't change his tone. Every word came out at the same temperature as the room, cool, controlled, deliberate. "You listed your skills as general housekeeping, cooking, and errands. Is that accurate?" "Yes, but Dylan, can we talk for a second, like normal people?" "This is how I talk now." That landed. She felt it in her chest, not because it was cruel, it wasn't, it was factual. And facts, Mia was learning, hit harder than insults. She tried again, leaned forward slightly, attempted the warmth she used to deploy at the diner counter back when charm was currency and a smile could add $3 to a tip. "You've done well, Dylan. I mean, look at this place. It's incredible. You should be really proud." He didn't react, didn't preen, didn't soften. A compliment that would have melted the old Dylan, the one who was starving for approval, who would have built a bridge across the Gulf of Mexico if someone had said, "Good job," landed on this version of him like rain on concrete. It just ran off. "The agency says you need work," Dylan said. "Immediately, no references." Flexible on pay. He opened the file again, scanned it. That usually means one of two things. Either you just moved to the area or you're in a situation where you can't afford to be selective. Mia's jaw tightened. I've been going through a rough patch. A rough patch. Yeah. 5 years is a long patch, Mia. She flinched, not at the words, at the precision of them. 5 years. He knew exactly how long it had been. To the season, maybe to the month. And he'd said it without emotion, the way an accountant reads a balance, just numbers, just time, just the measurable distance between the woman who climbed on a Harley-Davidson and the woman sitting in a $6 blouse in a house she couldn't have imagined. Where is he? Dylan asked. Who? The real man, Christian. The one who takes what he wants. He didn't use air quotes, didn't need to. The words had their own quotation marks, 5 years of scar tissue wrapped around each syllable. The agency profile says you're single. Is that accurate, or did they not ask? Mia's eyes dropped to her lap. It's complicated. It always is. Dylan, does he provide, Mia? That's a simple question. The man you left for, the one who gets things done. Does he provide for you? And that broke it. The dam, the mask, the whatever you want to call it that Mia had been holding up with both hands since she walked through the front door. It didn't crack slowly. It collapsed, all at once. Like a wall that's been taking water for years and finally gives up and lets the flood in. She covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook. The sound that came out of her was not pretty crying, not the kind from the movies, not the single tear rolling down the cheek. It was ugly, raw, the sound of a woman who had been holding her breath for so long that the exhale came out like a scream. He doesn't work, she said into her hands. He hasn't worked in 2 years. He sits in the apartment, a motel actually, we're in a motel, and he drinks and he watches TV and he breaks things when he's angry and she stopped. Pulled her hands down, her mascara had smeared, her lip was shaking. And on her left wrist, visible now that her sleeve had ridden up, there was a bruise. Faded to yellow-green, a week-old maybe, but unmistakable in its shape. Finger marks. 4 of them evenly spaced, like a signature written in force. Dylan saw it. His eyes tracked to it and stayed for exactly 1 second, then back to her face. He hits you, Dylan said, not a question. Mia nodded, small, ashamed. When he drinks, which is most of the time now. And the money? My money, he takes it, every paycheck, every tip. I've been waitressing at a place off Highway 6. You know the road, and every dollar I bring home, he finds. I tried hiding it once, in a shoe, under the mattress. She laughed, bitter, empty. He tore the room apart, found it in 10 minutes, spent it on parts for that stupid bike that hasn't even run in over a year. Dylan said nothing. His hands remained folded on the desk. His breathing was even. The AC hummed its low, steady hum. I made a mistake, Dylan. She looked at him now, fully. No mask, no charm, no angle. Just a 33-year-old woman in a $6 blouse with mascara running down her cheeks and finger-shaped bruises on her wrist, sitting in the most beautiful room she'd ever been in, begging the man she'd gutted for a chance to clean his floors. I was 28. I was stupid. I wanted excitement, and I confused it for something real. Christian was loud and dangerous, and he made me feel like I was in a movie, just like your friend Jose said, and I thought that was what living felt like. I didn't know. I didn't know that what you were giving me was the real thing, and I threw it away for a man who can't even. Her voice broke again. She pressed her fingers against her eyes. Please, Dylan, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm not asking you to take me back. I know that ship has sailed. I just need a job. I need income that Christian doesn't know about. I need to save enough to get out. To get away from him, I'll do anything. I'll scrub the floors on my hands and knees. I'll clean the bathrooms. I'll wash the windows. I don't care. I just need a chance. She dropped her hands into her lap, looked at him with red-rimmed eyes and a face that had aged 10 years in 5. Please, just one chance, that's all I'm asking. The room was silent. The AC breathed. Somewhere outside, a bird sang in one of the live oaks, oblivious to the fact that 2 people were sitting in a study surrounded by mahogany and marble and 5 years of wreckage that no amount of lemon polish could cover. Dylan looked at her. His face gave nothing away. Then he did something she didn't expect. He stood up. Dylan pushed his chair back and walked to the window, not quickly. Not dramatically. With the slow, measured stride of a man who needed 30 seconds to think and was going to take them whether anyone liked it or not. His hands were at his sides. His shoulders were level. The suit jacket shifted slightly across his back as he moved, and Mia watched him cross the room the way you watch someone hold your future in their hands without breathing. He stood at the window, looked out. The backyard first. The patio. The sprinklers. The live oaks throwing long morning shadows across grass so green it looked fake. He'd laid every flagstone on that patio himself. Planted 2 of those trees himself, transplants from a nursery in Tomball, bald and burlapped, hauled in the back of a company truck on a Saturday afternoon. He knew every inch of this property the way he knew the inside of a condenser unit. He'd built it, wired it, plumbed it, cooled it. And now, behind him, sitting in a leather chair he'd picked out at a furniture store in the Galleria, was the woman who'd once told him he wasn't man enough to provide basic comfort. He could help her. The thought arrived without invitation, the way thoughts do when you've spent your whole life being the guy who fixes things. It was reflex, muscle memory. The same instinct that had made him answer a pager at 2 in the morning in a motel room with whiskey on his breath. The instinct to repair, to restore, to make the broken thing work again. He could give her the job. It was nothing to him. A housekeeper's salary was a rounding error on his books. He could pay her under the table if she needed to hide it. He could set her up in the guest room if the motel was dangerous. He could make one phone call to a lawyer friend Lee knew and have a restraining order filed by Friday. He could save her. It would cost him nothing. But something made him look down, not at the backyard. At the street, the front of the property. Past the gate, past the driveway with the crepe myrtles, past the curb where the Bel Air neighborhood met the rest of Houston. And there it was. A car, parked on the street. 50 yards from the gate, tucked under the shade of a pecan tree, engine idling, he could see the faint shimmer of exhaust rising from the tailpipe in the morning heat. It was a sedan, rusted, brown maybe, or it had been brown once and was now the color of neglect. The front bumper was dented. The passenger side mirror was cracked. A fast food bag sat on the dashboard and the driver's window was rolled down. A man sat in the driver's seat. Big, leather vest. One arm hanging out the window, a cigarette between his fingers, the smoke curling up into the Houston air and dissolving. He was watching the house, not with curiosity, with expectation. The way a man watches a door, he expects someone to walk back through carrying something he wants. Christian, older, heavier. The arms that used to be lean and inked were thicker now, softer at the edges. The jawline that had been sharp under the wraparound sunglasses had blurred into something doughy. He looked like a man who'd spent 5 years sitting down on couches, on bar stools, in passenger seats, while someone else did the work. But it was him, unmistakable, the posture, the cigarette. The studied indifference of a man who believed the world owed him something and was permanently irritated that the check hadn't arrived. He was waiting. Dylan felt the understanding land like a compressor kicking on. Hard, immediate, mechanical. She didn't come alone. She came with him. He drove her here. He was parked outside the gate the way he'd parked outside the rental house on Ridley Lane 5 years ago, sitting on his bike, smoking, not helping with the bags, waiting for Mia to do the work while he collected the result. Nothing had changed. Different vehicle. Same arrangement. She goes in, she charms, she gets access to the money, and he waits outside like a getaway driver at a bank job. The trailer in Rosenberg had become a motel somewhere else. The Harley had become a rusted sedan. The leather jacket was gone and the savings account was gone and the dog was probably gone, too. But the system was identical. Mia was the tool. Christian was the hand that held it. And Dylan was the thing they were trying to pry open. She wasn't trying to leave Christian. She was trying to get a paycheck that she'd bring home to Christian. She was trying to install herself inside Dylan's life the way a bad contractor installs a cheap part. It looks right, it fits the slot, but give it 6 months and it'll blow the whole system. Dylan stared at the sedan for a long time. 5 seconds, maybe. 10. Long enough for the cigarette smoke to shift direction in a breeze he couldn't feel through the window. Then he turned around. Mia was watching him. She'd wiped her eyes, straightened in the chair. There was a tentative hope on her face, the look of someone who'd placed a bet and was waiting for the wheel to stop. Dylan walked back to the desk. He didn't sit down. He stood behind it, hands resting on the back of the chair, and looked at her the way he looked at a diagnostic readout that confirmed what he already suspected. "Who drove you here, Mia?" The hope flickered. "What? You said you took the bus. The number 82 from Rosenberg doesn't run this route. Who drove you?" Her mouth opened, closed. Her eyes went to the window just for a fraction of a second, just a flicker of a glance, but it was enough. Nobody. I took the Bel Air bus and walked from, there's a brown sedan parked outside my gate, idling, driver's side window down, a man in the seat, smoking. The color left her face, not slowly. All at once, like a thermostat dropping from 80 to 60 in a single click. That's, I don't know who, Mia. One word, her name, said with the weight of every lie he'd ever swallowed in a dark house on Ridley Lane, every cigarette smell he'd pretended not to notice, every motorcycle rev he'd forced himself to ignore, every dollar that had vanished from the savings account. He said her name the way a man closes a valve firmly, completely, with the knowledge that the flow has to stop or the whole system floods. She stopped talking. I can't hire you, Mia. 3 seconds of silence. The AC filled them, that constant, perfect 68-degree exhale. Dylan, please, it's not what you think. It's exactly what I think. It's what it's always been. He pulled the chair out, sat down, folded those clean, scarred, steady hands on the desk. You came here to get a paycheck, not to leave him, not to start over, to fund him. The way you funded him with my savings account. The way you funded him with the rent money. The way you've been funding him with your tips while he sits in a car outside someone else's house waiting for you to bring something back. That's not fair, fair. The word landed on the desk between them like a brick. You want to talk about fair? He didn't raise his voice. That was the thing. The old Dylan would have shrunk, would have folded. Would have swallowed the confrontation and chased it with silence. This Dylan just sat there, hands folded, voice level, eyes steady, and delivered the truth the way he delivered a diagnosis on a broken system, without emotion, without apology, without any interest in whether the customer liked what they heard. I can't hire you, and I won't. Mia stared at him. The hope was gone. The tears were gone. What replaced them was something older, something that had been living underneath the whole performance, the desperation, the confession, the rehearsed vulnerability, waiting for its cue. Her jaw set. Her eyes narrowed. Her posture shifted from supplicant to something harder, something made of the same material as the woman who had stood in a hallway in a stolen leather jacket and told him he wasn't a real man. And Dylan saw it, saw the mask reassemble in real time. Saw the softness drain and the edges sharpen and the real Mia, not the victim, not the beggar, but the woman who had always believed the world was a con and the only question was whether you were running it or falling for it, come roaring back to the surface. The temperature in the room hadn't changed, but everything else had. It started quiet, a flicker in her eyes, a tightening of her jaw. The way her hands shifted from folded in her lap to gripping the armrests of the chair, knuckles going white against the leather. Like a machine that's been running on low power and someone just flipped the switch to full. You know what, Dylan? Her voice was different now. Lower, tighter. The trembling was gone. The tears were gone. Even the mascara smears seemed to reorganize on her face into something closer to war paint. I didn't want to do this. I came in here humble. I came in here ready to work. But you want to sit up there behind your big desk in your fancy suit and look down at me? Fine, let's do this. Dylan didn't move. His hands stayed folded. His breathing stayed even. He had the posture of a man who'd seen this weather pattern before and knew exactly how much pressure the system could handle. I made you. She said it like she was reading it off a plaque. Excuse me? You heard me. I made you. She leaned forward. Her finger came up, pointed at him, jabbing the air between them. You were nothing before I left, Dylan. You were a sweaty little man in a broken van with a dead AC unit and $50 in the bank. You couldn't even keep the lights on. You couldn't afford a decent pair of work boots. You were going nowhere. Mia, no, you're going to listen. For once in your life, you're going to sit there and listen. She stood up. The chair rocked back on its legs. Everything you have, this house, those trucks, that suit, you built it because I left, because I lit a fire under you, because I showed you that nobody was going to hand you anything. I was the wake-up call, Dylan. I was the alarm clock that got you out of bed. And instead of saying, thank you, you're sitting there in your air-conditioned palace telling me I can't scrub your toilets. Sit down, Mia. I will not sit down. Her voice cracked against the mahogany walls like a slap. You owe me for every year I spent in that dump with you waiting for you to become something. You owe me for the push. You owe me for the motivation. Nobody else was going to tell you the truth, Dylan. Nobody else had the guts to say what I said. And now look at you, rich, successful, living in a mansion because of me, because I had the courage to leave. She was pacing now, 3 steps left, 3 steps right. Her arms were moving, her voice was climbing, and the controlled stillness of the room, the mahogany, the marble, the 68-degree perfection, was vibrating around her like a tuning fork struck too hard. Dylan watched her, calmly, the way you watch a pressure gauge climb toward the red. "Are you done?" he asked. "I'm not even close to done." She stopped pacing, turned to face him. Her eyes were wild now, not with tears, not with pain, but with the bright, reckless fire of a woman who had nothing left to lose and had decided to burn the room down on her way out. "You think you're better than me. You think you're some kind of success story. You're a mechanic, Dylan, a mechanic who got lucky. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. And you're going to sit there and deny me a job." She took a step toward the desk. Then another. Her hand reached for the pen holder or the folder or the edge of the desk itself. It was fast, aggressive, the movement of someone whose body had given up on words and was looking for something physical to do with all that rage. Dylan's right hand moved under the desk. One motion, smooth, practiced. He pressed the button. "Security," he said. His voice didn't waver, didn't rise, didn't crack. It was the same voice he used to call in work orders, the same voice he used to close contracts, the same voice that had once whispered, "No more noise," in a dark supply yard with a pawn shop tool in his hands. "Please escort the applicant out." Mia froze. "The what?" The study door opened. 2 men entered, both large. Both wearing black polo shirts with Garrison Security embroidered on the chest. They weren't aggressive, they were professional, which was somehow worse. They stood on either side of the doorway like bookends and waited. Mia looked at them, then at Dylan, then back at them. "You're kidding me." "Thank you for coming in, Ms. Miller. The agency will be notified that the position has been filled." "You're kidding me." She backed away from the desk. Her purse was still on the floor where she'd dropped it earlier. She scooped it up, clutched it to her chest. "You're having me thrown out like I'm some kind of like I'm trash?" "Ma'am," one of the guards said, polite, firm. "This way, please." Mia's face twisted. 5 years of bad decisions, broken promises, and borrowed time, all of it compressed into a single expression that sat somewhere between fury and the moment right before a person realizes that they've run out of doors to walk through. "You're pathetic," she said, looking straight at Dylan, spitting the word like it was the last bullet in a gun she'd been saving. "You hear me? You're pathetic. You always were and you always will be. A suit doesn't change what you are. A big house doesn't change what you are. You're still that sad little man in a broken van, and you know it, you know it." Dylan looked at her, and for the first time in the entire meeting, something moved behind his eyes. Not anger, not pain, something quieter. Something that looked, if you caught it at the right angle, like the last molecule of grief leaving a body that had finally finished processing it. "Goodbye, Mia." The guard stepped forward. One placed a gentle hand on her elbow. She jerked away. "Don't touch me." "Ma'am, please." She turned and walked, fast. Down the hallway, past the photographs, past the lilies, past the console table, past the front door that Lee held open with a face so deliberately blank it could have been carved from the same marble as the floor. Mia didn't look at any of it. She stormed through the foyer and out the door and down the long, perfect driveway with its crepe myrtles and knockout roses, her scuffed black flats slapping the pavement, her purse banging against her hip. Dylan stood at the study window, watched. She reached the gate, didn't slow down, turned left on the sidewalk and walked 50 yards to the brown sedan idling under the pecan tree. She opened the passenger door and got in. Even through the closed window, even from this distance, Dylan could see it. Christian's head snapping toward her, his mouth moving fast, his hand hitting the steering wheel. The universal body language of a man demanding to know why she came back empty-handed. Mia's head dropped. She stared at her lap. Said something Dylan couldn't hear but could imagine. An apology, probably. An excuse. A promise to try again, somewhere else with someone else. Christian threw the car into gear. The sedan lurched away from the curb with a squeal of tires that sounded nothing like a Harley-Davidson and everything like the dying protest of a vehicle that deserved better than the man behind its wheel. They drove off, down the tree-lined street, past the brick walls and the wrought iron gates and the landscaping that cost more than their motel room, into the Houston heat, which was waiting for them on the other side of the gate the way it always waited, patient, relentless, indifferent. Gone. Dylan watched until the sedan turned a corner and disappeared. Then he stood at the window for another 10 seconds, maybe 15, just standing, just breathing, just listening to the silence of a house he'd built with his own hands in a neighborhood he'd earned with his own sweat in a life he'd constructed one compressor, one contract, one fair invoice at a time. The AC hummed. That sound. That perfect, constant, almost inaudible hum. The sound of a system running exactly the way it was designed. No rattle, no wheeze, no strain, just the steady, rhythmic exhalation of air at 68 degrees, cycling through every room, every vent, every corner of the house, touching everything and disturbing nothing. He'd spent his whole career listening to machines, learning their language. Diagnosing them by sound, a bad bearing here, a low charge there, a contactor clicking when it shouldn't. He could hear the health of a system the way a musician hears a wrong note. This system was healthy. This system was perfect. This house, his house, was exactly the right temperature. A knock on the study door. "Come in," Lee entered. She was carrying 2 cups of coffee, the good stuff, from the Keurig she'd insisted on buying for the home office, not the break room drip from the strip mall. She set one on Dylan's desk, on the leather blotter, exactly where he liked it. She stood there for a second, reading him. Lee always read him. It was one of the things that made her invaluable. She could walk into a room and take the temperature of the man the way he took the temperature of a building, and she always knew whether to talk or be quiet. Today she chose to talk, but gently. "You okay, boss?" Dylan picked up the coffee, took a sip. It was hot and bitter and exactly right. He looked at Lee, looked at the window, looked at the empty street where a rusted sedan had been. Looked at his desk, where the agency file still sat open to a photo of a dark-haired woman with tired eyes and a $6 blouse, and a life that had gone exactly where Jose said it would go 5 years ago. He closed the file, set it aside. "I'm fine, Lee." He took another sip, set the cup down, straightened a stack of papers on his desk, picked up his pen. The AC hummed in the background, steady and even a heartbeat that never skipped. "Better than fine." Lee nodded, picked up the agency file without being asked. "I'll call the agency. Tell them we're going with the hotel manager from Galveston." "Good. And you've got Pete Salazar on a call at 2 about the Northside expansion. I told him you'd have the fleet numbers ready." "I will." And Lee, "Yeah. Order the new trucks for the Northside when you get a chance, and make sure the guys have good AC in the cabs." He paused, looked down at his hands, clean, scarred across every knuckle, steady. "I don't want them sweating like I used to." Lee smiled, small, private, the kind of smile you give when you understand something that wasn't said out loud. "You got it, boss." She walked out, closed the door behind her. Softly. Dylan sat alone in the study, the mahogany, the marble, the cool, clean air, the silence that was not loneliness but peace, the hard-earned, carefully maintained, precisely calibrated peace of a man who had learned, the hard way, that the only climate you can truly control is the one you build yourself. He picked up his pen. Opened the Salazar file. Started working. Outside, the Houston sun was climbing toward noon, pushing the temperature past 90, baking the sidewalks and the driveways and the parking lots and the rooftops of 10,000 buildings whose systems would hum and strain and sometimes break under the load. And when they broke, someone would call, and someone would answer. And the work would continue the way it always continued, one repair, one contract, one steady hand at a time. The AC hummed. Dylan worked. The past was closed.